Yo, what is good, YouTube? Welcome back to another JC2K video. In today's video, we're going to be ranking the best small forwards in NBA 2K25 MyTEAM here on this tier list. Before we hop into the video, if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Help me push towards the 40,000 subscriber mark on the channel. Upload every single day, multiple videos a day. Would really appreciate it if y'all do subscribe. But without further ado, let's hop right into it. So the first small forward on the list today is going to be Michael Beasley. I think Beasley's definitely A tier, and I think could actually be argued S tier still. He is extremely good to the point where I'm actually going to call me biased. Now, he's going to be the highest card in A tier. If you have a badged Beasley, or if you are really, really good at dribbling, there is a serious argument to me that he is S tier. He is one of the 2 or 3 best shot creators at the small forward position, and the other 2 are the 100 overalls. I mean, he is an insane card, legitimately one of the very best offensively in all of my team. Defensively, his card is not insane though, and I think that is worth keeping in mind, but I do think he's an extremely elite card. There's no doubt about that in my mind whatsoever. So I do think the card is going to be very, very nice. And yeah, I'm a fan. Beasley's really, really good. Gerald Wallace, great defender. Offensively, he's not insane, so I will say that is worth keeping in mind, but I do think he's very, very good. I think he's definitely has got real slashing ability. I think defensively, he's legitimately solid. I think he does a lot of things well, man. I think he's a very, very good card in my team, and I think he's got a lot of versatility. Definitely not a bad card at all. I think B tier is fair. Larry Bird, I am not a fan of. I do not like his cards this year at all. I really never have. There was never a point in which I really did enjoy Larry Bird's cards this year, I wouldn't say. I think he's a very solid, in theory, card, stat and badge wise at least, but on pay, like in terms of actual production, his jumper's ugly, and I think when you're comparing him to the best of the best, which is what this list consists of, he's one of the worst. As is Detlef Schrempf. Ugly jump shot, not a card that I like a lot either. I'm just not a fan of Detlef Schrempf here in my team. I think he's as mediocre as it gets, basically. I think he stinks, honestly. Not a fan. I know he's tall, but that's about the only value he provides. Scottie Pippen, more of a shooting guard than a small forward, but at small forward, he's still legitimately viable. He's 6'8". He's a great defender, and he's a great catch and shoot shooter with a great fade. That is good enough to make him a very, very solidly high-level card in my team, and still, to me, puts him in the A tier at the small forward position. Rudy Gay gives you great shot creation, but not incredible defense, and I don't think he's quite as good of a shot creator as Beasley is. Honestly, I personally think he's basically a worse version of Beasley, I think is a fair way to put it. He's not a bad card by any means, but I'm not going to sit here and say he's like the best card in the game either. I think he's good. I don't think he's insane, and in my opinion, putting him in the A tier is honestly maybe a little bit high at this point. I don't mind him in B tier at all. Lamar Odom, C tier. Honestly, maybe D. He is not good. His jumper is ugly. I know he's 6'10", but I don't like the jump shot. I just don't think he does all that many things on the court well. In all honesty, I'm just not the biggest fan of the card. I think C tier and arguably D tier is where Lamar deserves to be. I'm looking at this list. There really aren't any D tier guys. I think Lamar's D tier, to be honest, because he's worse than pretty much all these cards. Tyler Hansbrough's really good. I think his jumper's great. I think defensively he's super nice. I like that he's got every single badge in the game on at least gold as a base card, and I think he even has a little bit of movement as well. He's athletic. He's got good size. I think he's solid, man. I think he's really solid. I think he's A tier. I think Pippen's size makes him B, though, by the way, so I'm going to move Pippen down. Obviously, Weber's S tier. I think he's probably still the best small forward in the game, despite his jumper not being unbelievably insane. As a whole, I do think he is probably the best of all of the small forwards that are in my team right now. Definitely a really good card. Definitely S tier, no doubt about that. Giannis, the Opal is probably A. Doesn't have the hotspots or the jump shot release that the Dark Matter has. The Dark Matter's got the faster jump shot and better shooting hotspots. At this point, with how good the position is, I think A tier for this Giannis is totally fair still. I still think he's a great card, and I have no issues whatsoever with him in the A tier, but for me, I don't think I'd go S tier anymore. Just my opinion. Brandon Ingram. Again, not as much a small forward as he is a shooting guard. I don't mind the card, but at small forward, I don't think he's quite got the defense to be truly elite. I'd rather have him at shooting guard. His size is what provides value at shooting guard and makes him a really solid shooting guard. At small forward, he's not as good. I think, to me, that he is probably a C tier guy as well. LeBron is A tier at this point. I don't think he's S. His Opal honestly might even be B, because his Opal's got the release on normal. This is going to annoy y'all, but this is a really loaded list. I'm putting Opal, LeBron, in B because his Dark Matter isn't, I'm not even certain his Dark Matter is S tier, to be totally honest. I mean, no, that's not true. His Dark Matter is S tier, but his Opal's not as good as his Dark Matter. The release being on normal despite not being a horrible release, it does matter. And I think a high B is probably the fairest spot for him. KD's going to be A tier. I don't have him S. I think he's very, very good, but I don't love the fact that, His movement isn't, in my opinion, all that insane. People love KD's movement and his release, and I don't totally get it, because I'm not saying it's bad, but I just don't think it's like insane either. People have like loved KD's animations the last couple of years, and I don't really get it. Never been the biggest fan of his animations myself. Miles Bridges is a bit undersized. I also don't like him as a human being. Should I factor that into my ranking of him? Maybe not. Do I factor it in a little bit? Maybe a little bit. He's also just only 6'6", 6'7", so he is undersized as well. I think realistically, you're looking at a guy who's probably not unbelievably great, in all honesty, at this point. I think C tier for Miles Bridges is probably the right position. Kyle Kuzma, he's a worse Rudy Gay. He doesn't give you a lot of shot creation. He's not an extremely elite defender. In my opinion, he's not completely horrible, but I don't think he's great. So, in my opinion, I think we're going to go C tier for Kuzma. He's just kind of there. Jonathan Bender, B tier. Really good size at 7 foot. That's his biggest value for sure, is the fact that he is a very, very good defensive option at 7 foot because of the switchability he provides. I understand the stats and badges aren't insane, but the jumper's also really nice. So he's kind of a cone, but he gives you really good switchability and a great jump shot, and that is enough to provide him with enough value to be a B tier guy on this list. Definitely a card that I am a fan of. Hito Turkoglu, C tier. Don't love the jump shot. It's not awful, but it's not great. He is 6'10", but he's not a god tier defender. I don't love the card. I think C tier is probably right for him. Dark Matter LeBron is still S tier, although he's towards the bottom of S tier. He still is a very solid card, though. I think obviously great jump shot, great fade, great defense, great slashing, great everything. He's a great card. There's no doubt about it. LeBron doesn't have any like serious significant flaws that I can think of, really. So in my opinion, not the biggest fan of LeBron cards this year, at least at this point in the year, without much movement, but I still think his Dark Matter is S tier. So that is an easy choice. Scotty Barnes, unfortunately, I think is going to be another D tier. He's undersized at only 6'7". I don't believe his jumper is great, nor his movement. I just think realistically on a list this loaded, he's towards the bottom of it, and I am going to put him in the D tier. Adam Morrison's going to go low A. I think he's worse than Beasley, but I do think he's good enough to be low A because the stats and badges are still really, really good. Defensively, he is a stud. Well, he's a good defender. He's not a great defender, but he is undersized and his movement isn't like unbelievably insane. I would rather have Beasley. I'm not trolling about that, but I do think that Morrison is a very solid card, and I think low A is probably the right spot for him. I think he does at least deserve to be on the list relatively high. Paulo Banchero is like low B, high C. He's 6'10", but his jumper's still on normal. His movement isn't great. His stats and badges are super nice. He's very complete. But I just think at this point in the year, we're getting to the point where if you can't do much besides just catch and shoot wide open and not have the best jump shot too, like I think B tier or C tier, honestly, is probably fair for him. Mashburn's fine, but his jumper's not insane. His stats and badges are really good, but he's not a crazy card. I mean, he's a good card. He's not what I would consider a great card at this point in the year. I think C tier is probably the right spot for him. Definitely not a bad card, but again, at a loaded position, it's not that hard to understand why he wouldn't be extremely high up on the list either. So I'm going to put Mashburn in C tier. Carlos Boozer, sorry. I got Jamal Mashburn and Carlos Boozer's names mixed up. Is still A tier as well. He is, in my opinion, slightly worse than Tyler Hansbrough, but not by a lot. I don't think he's a bad card at all, and I think he does a lot of things very well. So to me, definitely a guy who can be argued A tier still, and I love his release. I think he's very, very good. Giannis is S tier for sure. I think he's still a top 3 or 4 small forward in the game. I still think he's very, very versatile, and I think he provides a lot of real value as a really as in everything, honestly. Besides like primary scoring option, he's an amazing slasher, he's an amazing defender. Honestly, he's not a bad shooter with his release on quick and a jump shot that isn't bad. I mean, I personally think he is really, really solid, and I'm a big fan of the card. I really am. I think he does a lot of things very, very well. So I think S tier for sure still. That one's not hard for me. Kenyon Martin, I think, is super underrated. I think he's actually got a decent jump shot. I think defensively he's awesome. He's extremely athletic. I think the card is legitimately good. I'm a fan of Kenyon Martin. I think B tier is totally fair for him. I got no issues at all with Kmart in the B tier. Although I will say that means I feel like I have to move Paulo up too. Paulo's also got to be B tier. I just think despite Paulo not having like an unbelievable release, the release is still pretty good, and he is still, only... he's still 6'10". He's still got extremely good complete badges and stuff. He's a B tier guy. Sean Kemp is probably also a B tier guy. I don't love this card. I don't hate this card. I think his jumper's a little mid, but he is extremely athletic. He's got good size. He's got decent movement. He's got great stats and badges. I think he's B tier. I don't think he's higher or lower than this. This feels like it's probably the exact spot where he deserves to be. Whereas the Jonathan Isaac, whose jumper also isn't quite as great, has more defense than Kemp does. And I think he still deserves to be A tier because he's 6'10" and absolutely dominant defensively, one of the best locks in the game. So him not being an insane offensive card doesn't matter quite as much because he's so good on the defensive end of the court, which puts him in the A tier for me. Jason Tatum is C tier in my opinion, and call me crazy, I just don't love the card. I think his fade, he doesn't have a fade, he doesn't have movement. I'm not really sure what he does at an elite level, to be totally honest. The only thing that I would say is his jump shot is really nice, but I don't think he's an insane card by any means. I don't think C tier is insane at all to stay with Tatum. Like, his cards just haven't been that good. He also doesn't have elite level size even, so not an insane card. Kukoc is not bad, but he's also not great. I feel like he's on that Hito Turkoglu level where he's 6'10", and his jumper's better than Hito's, but he doesn't quite have the shot creation that Hito has. Defensively, he's not bad, but he's also not insane. He's not super athletic. Like, I don't love the card. I think C tier is probably the fairest spot for him at this point. You could argue low B though. I wouldn't be mad at you if you said low B for Mr. Kukoc. I think he's definitely a decent card. Blake Griffin is S tier. He's the second best small forward in the game after Chris Webber. That one I don't have to think about. It's a no-brainer. I mean, he's obviously S tier. He's one of the best cards in the game, in my opinion. Does pretty much everything well. Definitely S tier. Andre Kirilenko gives you a ton of defense, but he's not a great slasher. I think his jumper's kind of inconsistent and hard to time, hard to green, all that type of stuff. Like, I don't think that his guard's very good, personally. I'm not the biggest fan of Andre Kirilenko. Just my opinion, but I don't love the card. MPJ, 6'10" shooter with decent defense, but I'm not going to sit here and act like he's like best of the best as a scorer or anything. I don't hate the card, but I don't love the card either. I don't know. He's fine. He's there. He's not an insane option to me, though, personally. I don't think he's like a must-have card or anything like that. Kind of like Kemp. He's one of the worst dark matter wings in this game, probably. Lauri Markkanen without the duo, despite being 7 foot, I don't think his jumper's not as good as Bender's. I don't think he's as good as Bender. If I have Bender B tier, I think Lauri's got to be C tier. His only value is being tall with a decent jump shot. That's about it. And then Josh Smith is the final S tier guy on this list. A little bit of an undersized S tier and D tier, but that's how these lists often go. So hopefully y'all enjoy the video anyway. If you do, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. And I'll be back with more 2K content very, very soon. I appreciate y'all. Peace.